And if you look at other similar countries in other parts of the world, Cote d'Ivoire is at 50, Vietnam is at 39. If Kenya aspires to be the logistics and supply chain hub for East Africa, that performance probably needs to improve. What can we drive through from that in terms of what it means for Kenyans? Yeah? In terms of Kenyans, I've got a slide here which I call the tale of two Carrefours. There are no prizes for guessing which one is which. The one on the left is from French Carrefour. A bit of online shopping by me this week revealed that you can buy semi-skim milk in France for the equivalent of 82 shillings per litre. Wandered down to Carrefour in the Hough. Turns out there it's 150 shillings a litre. Now, there are lots of structural reasons why the milk is more expensive in Kenya, but amongst those reasons are the logistics costs. Now, I should emphasise here, I'm not having a go at either Carrefour or Brookfield. I'm sure there are lots of reasons why those products come in at that cost. But those numbers have a real consequence for everyday Kenyans. And a big part of those costs is the logistics costs of getting those goods to those markets. So, how do we address this problem? How do we push this forward? Why does the supply chain matter to all companies and to the Kenyan economy? Supply chain management is one of the fastest changing areas in the world. I think we all know one of the reasons for that. One of the reasons for that is the internet. The internet has changed logistics, it's changed the supply chain. But it's also other things as well. There's robotics going on, there's a lot of other technologies coming into the supply chain. East Africa has the opportunity to leapfrog some other parts of the world. There's no need for East Africa to go out and build a bunch of old secondary shopping malls, which the other markets have done, and they're now all redundant, they can turn into other assets. It can move quickly into e-commerce and skip those scales of development. But it's important to acknowledge that the rest of the world will not be standing still while this goes on. While I was doing some research for this presentation, I came across a paper by a research house called ABI, who reckon when they did their report in March of this year that there are 4,000 fully automated warehouses in the world currently. They estimated that in 2025, which is only 6 years from now, there will be 50,000 fully automated warehouses throughout the world. Now, even if those aren't in Kenya, they're going to provide international competition to Kenya. So it's important to see that you're not just catching up with the rest of the world, but you've got to anticipate where they're going to move. Supply chain strategy is obviously the first step in addressing this issue for an individual company. Do you have one? Do you have slobs? A slob is not your least favourite employee in this context. A slob is a slow-moving or obsolete stock. Have you got lots of things sitting around in your warehouse, in your retail outlet, which isn't moving and is just going out of date? Do you have to change your demand plan or manufacturing plan frequently? Do you find yourself getting whipsawed around in terms of what you're either making or buying does change quickly on a short-term basis because you get caught out? Do you have stockouts? Do you find you have poor demand forecasting? Do you have demand forecasting? Is your SKU growth out of control? What that means is, have you got more and more items you're having to stock without knowing which ones are really making the contribution to your turnover, but also your profit? Are you doing that basic 80-20 analysis? Do you think that the supply chain is just about purchasing or manufacturing? If your answer to any of those is yes, then the chances are you might not have a supply chain strategy. Logistics Bureau, who may have been slightly biased, did a survey, but they reckon that 63% of companies don't have a proper supply chain strategy. So what is it? Fortunately, it's not complicated, at least in concept. It's driven from your business strategy, but it starts from your customers, it starts from your sales forecasting, it starts from your operations management. It doesn't start from your buying department. What have you promised to your customers? And therefore, what do you need to do in order to fulfill that promise? If you're doing door-to-door delivery, it's all very well doing door-to-door delivery. You've also got to be able to deal with the fact that people might not be in. They might not want to return what they've done. You've got to be able to deal with the returns and no-shows. Don't just deal with them, but deal with them efficiently as a matter of course. They will occur. Supermarket supply. Every single supermarket has a slightly different sales proposition. So if you're supplying to a supermarket, you need to know what the configuration of those goods are when they go to that supermarket. Do they want only whole pallets? Do they want mixed pallets? Do they not want pallets at all? All of those things need to be bear in mind. If you're not supplying to that supermarket with those things, then you're making a mistake, and your supply chain strategy is not in tune with your sales strategy. Supply chain strategy for an individual company is essentially simple. It's two things. It's your suppliers and your customers, and what you want is a process between the two which is as simple and as cost effective as possible. Cost effectiveness is important. It's important not to overspec this. Don't over-deliver. If your platform is delivering next day delivery throughout Nairobi, and only 80% of your customers want that, then don't deliver to the other 20. You're incurring a great deal it's expensive to do next day delivery. So don't overdo it. If you're analysing your customers, it's not necessary. Have you got a strategy? You must be able to measure it. If you've got a strategy and you can't measure it, then it's not a strategy. Yeah? And you must be able to measure those things that are important to your individual organisation. So delivery times, failures for an order, the level of shrinkage that you're experiencing. Are you achieving the levels of traceability? Traceability, very important, food, pharmaceuticals, all those sort of things. Some of those KPIs will be about cost. Inventory cost, the cost of holding your stock, the facility cost, the cost of your warehouse, transport costs, and we'll talk a little bit about transport costs a lot later with Joseph, labour cost obviously, and service failure cost. It's important to have a robust supply chain. Supply failure is a very big cost. A few years ago, Porsche decided they would save a few euros on every single car by running down the number of suppliers and some of their key components to just one. So they have one supplier who provided the thread to the seatbelts in their cars. Supplier went bust. 2 weeks of lost production is what happened for Porsche. 2 weeks of lost production for Porsche. I don't know how many euros that is, but it's a lot. It's also a lot of very particular and disappointing customers. Asset utilisation. Asset utilisation is basically making sure that you use your assets. If you've got a truck fleet, if you've decided to invest in a truck fleet, you want to make sure it's working. If your truck fleet is stuck in a very busy part of town and you can only use it in the middle of the day and at night, and you're paying for that truck fleet to sit there for half a day not doing anything, that's a lot of money. Minimise the number of touches. What do I mean by that? Every single time you touch a product that goes through your supply chain is a risk. It's a cost, because every time you do something to a product, you move it, you pack it, you deliver it, you lose it, that all costs money. Every time you touch it, there's a chance that something goes wrong. You damage it, you lose it, it's stolen, whatever. So look at your supply chain and think about the minimum number of touches that you can make to it. An extreme example would be if you're delivering to a retailer who's very cost-price driven and who's doing a sort of cash and carry format where basically they're just putting pallets onto a floor where the customer picks them up. If you design the supply chain correctly for that retail model, your staff should never actually touch the individual product. They're delivered to you on a pallet. You use mechanical handling equipment in a retail store which is designed that you can deliver that pallet to the floor during closed hours. And then the first person to touch that product is the customer who pulls it out of the pallet. So no touches and no chances of something going wrong. Outsourcing. Outsourcing is important. We'll talk about it a little bit on the panel. But lots of organisations don't always have the critical skills they need for managing their supply chain. I think 83% of companies outsource some aspect of their supply chain. And today we've got guys from a couple of 3PLs who specialise in helping customers with those aspects of their logistics. But you can't just throw the problem to a 3PL. 3PL will only work well if you tell them exactly what you want to do and it's embedded into your supply chain strategy. East Africa applications. I think it's realistic to think that all of these things can be applied to the East African market and they can be applied fairly quickly. The thing I thought about when I was thinking about successful stories of supply chain in East Africa was the flower trade. I don't think there's anybody in the room here who's from the flower trade. And there's probably a good reason for that, because they've got it sorted. Their supply chain is complete, it's intact. They pick those flowers, which are delicate things, get them to the airport, they keep them cold, they pack them, they price them, they sell them online, and they ship them to Europe, the most demanding market that we can find. Think about what that would happen if you did that for avocados. Think about if you did that for bananas. Think about all the agricultural products that could apply to you. You could get that level of supply chain through. Kenny grows more roses than any other country on the planet. But that's because it's got a system to deliver those things to the right market. There's nothing fundamental that stops those practices being applied to other industries, both for export but also to supply retail in Kenya. Lots and lots of people have read about wastage rates in agriculture businesses in Kenya. There's lots of debate about what that number is. I've seen numbers that are in the 30s, that are in the 40s, but there doesn't seem to be much debate that it's a very high number. There's an enormous number of value being destroyed through those wastage rates. Redundant layers of distribution. Tim, one of our panelists will talk about this. His business model is removing unnecessary levels of distribution and cost. If you've got a huge number of wholesalers between your customer and, say, your pint of milk, all of those people cost money, all of those things cost time, but you also lose data. Yeah? You don't understand who's using your product at the end because you have no visibility of what's going on. And therefore it's very difficult to plan your market. Warehouses, right, we're back to warehouses. Obviously, ALP, we're very keen on warehouses. We believe in them a lot. Has to be said, in fairness, warehouses form a very important part of the supply chain, but as we're going to talk about later, they're not everything in the supply chain. You need the government to come to the party, you need roads, you need railways. Well, I'm sure we could all be critical of how we think the government builds its roads and railways, but they are building them. And once they've done their bit, it's important that the private sector does their bit in terms of utilising those assets to the full extent. What can I tell you briefly about ALP? The only thing I'll make up about ALP is we're not a standard property developer. So when you come to our building, you come to a building that we are going to hold for a long period of time. We are not looking to flip our buildings out in 18 months' time. We're not a fund. We don't have a date by which time we have to get out of town. We take the view that we are going to be there with our tenants in 4 years' time, dealing with any problems that are in those buildings. So that's our mindset when we're building our buildings. We're going to be dealing with this building in 5, 7, 8, 10 years' time. We think that aligns us really well with our tenants, and we think that works well as a business model. Why do our warehouses work? Well, we'll talk about a little bit about why our warehouses work. I want to talk about that in the context of the difference between a warehouse and a distribution centre. A warehouse is something you store stuff in. Now, you can store stuff in our warehouses, and I will happily sit down with any of you and go through the maths and prove they're very high. If you use them properly, you will get the cost per pallet down below a traditional go-town in the industrial area. But you will try very hard, and you will have to try very hard not to get some additional benefit from those buildings, even after you've got the cost benefit from storage. And that's where you start your journey from a warehouse to a distribution centre. Distribution centre deals with this wonderful new word, omni-channel. This is all about using a warehouse to supply all of your distribution chains. Yes, you've got to ship stuff to shops, but you're also going to use it for your e-strategy. You're going to distribute directly to your customer, be it a business customer or an individual consumer from that store. Has to be able to deal with returns, product customization if you want to do last minute changes to a product. Needs to be able to do supply click and collect points once those have been set up. It might be a collection point in itself. You might have customers come directly to that facility, pick stuff up. Online marketing should be based in a DC. There's no point getting a product and sending it to your office to photograph it in order just to get it sent back to the warehouse so it can be distributed. And all of these things become more and more about, less about just how much you store, but about the speed and efficiency of throughput. How does a grade A building become a DC? Why is it different from a go-down? Access. When we use a piece of land for a warehouse, we use 50% of that land for the yard. And why do we do that? Because access, speed of turnaround is really important. You must be able to park your trucks, you must be able to get on your docks, you mustn't be held up because your neighbour is parked on his dock. You mustn't have water flood the yard every time it rains. Most of all the yards must be strong so they can actually stand up to the fact that they can have trucks run over them and not fall apart. Docks and levers. Again, a simple technology, but it allows you to use mechanical handling equipment on a wide range of trucks without having to manually unload or load trucks. Very important in terms of driving down labour costs, but also achieves throughput, also cuts down on the amount of damage that always occurs when you handle things by hand. You've obviously got security is obviously important. We have put a very high specification fence, and we have one single gatehouse that is one way in, one way out. But we also help the tenants secure their building as well. There's just one pedestrian access into the building. The rest of the access is through the gates. So it's very easy to manage who goes in and out of your building and what goes in and out of your building. FM2 specification, FM2 specification. What that means is the floor is very flat and it's very strong. That's important because it's important for your mechanical handling equipment. It means the battery doesn't run down very quickly because you're not going over bumps, you're not going uphill. But also the fact that the joints are armoured. It doesn't damage the wheels on your forklift that you just spend a great deal of money on, you're spending a great deal of money hiring. It's also sealed, it doesn't produce dust, it doesn't start giving off concrete dust after 18 months. The office design is deliberately put above the docks so that you don't lose high bay areas, which is your high value part of your real estate. So the whole thing is designed around mechanical handling equipment. These buildings that we have built at Tattoo, for instance, are speculative buildings, so we have built them without knowing who the end user is. So these buildings are as flexible as we could possibly make them, not just for the first tenant, but in 5 years if they have to relet them to the second tenant. So they're very high. You can then adapt them by putting cold storage, putting facilities inside them. You can put in mezzanine floors if you want to double up and do manually sort stuff on hand. And we've put in the standard grade A dock ratio, which is typically one dock per 1,000 square metres of storage. But we've also made sure there's space that if you're a very high turnover client, you can put in additional docks without having to tear the building apart to do it. And these things make these buildings particularly flexible, as I said, not just for when the first tenant comes, but when the second tenant comes and the third tenant comes. Apart from being grade A, the additional benefits you get from ALP buildings is local adaptation. It's a sad fact of life that the electricity is not 100% reliable in Kenya, so of course they have full power backup. I've already talked about the yards. When it rains in Kenya, it really rains. So all of the water drainage comes off the roof, and it's a lot of water when it comes off those roofs, goes underneath the yard. It doesn't go through the yard, it all goes straight out of the facility without going through the yard. Solar power is available. If you want to use the roofs, solar power, you're using that at Tattoo, that means that your KPLC tariff comes down by 30%. It's not in the industrial area. That might seem like a strange thing to say, but we see that as a real advantage. It's on the orbital roads that are now being delivered in Nairobi. And that means that you have access to good roads, you get much more certainty in terms of your delivery times. And uncertainty really costs money in a supply chain. If you've got uncertainty, that means you have to buffer it. You have to hold more stock, you have to allow more time, you have to have more trucks, all costs money. Something else we do at ALP is if a customer wants those additional things that you build into our warehouse, you can put it with the racking, the office, the automation, temperature control, can all be put in and rentalised. So we can add that to the rent and you can avoid the capital expenditure. Here are just a few photographs of the care and delicate care and attention contractors, or I have to say it here today. Put into building an enormous amount of time and effort went into putting in the foundation to make sure the floor is solid, stable and doesn't crack. Floor is the most important thing in a modern warehouse. If the roof leaks, I can fix it. If the dock breaks, I can fix it. If the floor cracks, while you've got to turn it in there, you've got a real problem. If it starts to degrade, starts to get flake away, covered in concrete dust, this is incredibly difficult to fix. So the thing we spent the most time running on was the floor. Came here at the moment. One is the Tattoo City, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, and the other is the Talisi, which is just outside west of Nairobi on the 104. There's excellent locations for distributing into Nairobi, and we're happy to do. Tattoo is constructionally complete. There is still some space left there. Talisi, we're doing a wider range of buildings. We're doing the Class A buildings, we're doing some smaller buildings, and we will do build-to-suit projects. If you've got a specific large requirement that you need for those that you want on that site, we're happy to talk to you about doing a long lease and sale back on those mappings. Happy to do those projects for you on a long-term lease. I got my video back just in time to thank you all very much for your attendance and forbearance, so thank you for that. I'm always cursed by technology, it's a shame. Anyway, what I'd like to do is hand you back to Marisa and then we can get into the panel. What I would ask is, please, can we try and make this an interactive session? We've got some questions we're going to ask the panel and talk about immediately, but we really want to hear about the issues you face and you see as a problem in this market, because our business to succeed, we have to provide you with a solution. It's not about me telling you what the solution is. We talked a little about the general terms of supply chain, but really I want to hear about specific concerns, specific things that we can help you with, people who work in that area. Thank you very much for your time and attendance. Very much.